I took a little bit of a departure in reading Stephen King's The Stand, which was for me because I don't read in the horror genre. Sometimes I like to watch a horror movie on TV on the rare occasion that I get the thrill for a little bit of creeps. But for a novel by Stephen King, who is called the King of Horror, this was a first for me. Overall, I did enjoy it. It was an interesting book. The Stand is over 1,000 pages long if you find the unabridged version. Yet, there is interest all the way throughout to keep you going. To give a little bit of a summary of the book, well, it reminds of a situation we had just a few years ago, and that's still going on some level. I'll tell you what happens in the book. There is a lab somewhere that creates biological warfare, and a potent virus is released. It's the super flu, and it ends up killing 99 point something % of the population, so almost everyone in the world within a matter of weeks. So if you said this reminds of the COVID, you're right. And obviously the mortality rate was not that high, but it was still heart-shearing, you could say, to lose so many people throughout the world. So again, very much relevant to our times, even though Stephen King wrote this in the mid-70s. Now, what is the book about? So once the majority of people are erased, the survivors get these dreams, mostly depending on the state of their heart, you might say. So they get dreams. There's this dark man, and he's sort of a demon, kind of said from the Bible. He is Legion, the one that was in the group of pigs that were driven off a cliff. He's that one that possesses, and he's always somehow active in the world, it seems. So he gives these dreams to people, and if people have some darkness in their hearts, or more of it than the light, than the goodness, they're drawn to him. And then there's this other character, kind of like a prophetess, you might say. She's Mother Abigail, an old woman from Nebraska, and she is calling people to the good side to save them from this dark man. And she ends up organizing a good society called the Free Zone in Boulder, Colorado. And I was thinking it was probably there because that's sort of towards the center of the US. And the dark guy, also known as the Walk-In Dude or Randall Flagg, this demon organizes around Sin City, so Las Vegas, and then there are the Rocky Mountains dividing the two. And as the book is called The Stand, they're supposed to confront each other, and it's supposed to be a battle of good and evil. And it's pretty obvious when you're reading this book, Stephen King was going for something very special, to write a great American novel in the horror genre, which is perfect for him. And why is it that way, by the way? Because there are so many specifics about places throughout America and small towns, landmarks, in the US, on a greater level in North America, and even further, even mentions of South America. So this definitely was an aspiration towards a great American novel. And I think he does succeed, in a way. I would say without qualification that it was a success. So, to start with, the first and central theme, the battle of good and evil, this happens on multiple layers. At first, what we can see most clearly is the people. Are the people's hearts good or bad? There is the argument for relativism, meaning they're all people just like us, even the ones in Las Vegas. They seem almost like they could be your friend. They've chosen a dark route, whether they've been led to it or whether it was their intention. Yet, on the other hand, it's not all forgiving in that there is something fundamentally wrong with certain people. Like, for me, the clearest example was the character of Jenny. Dana, which went from the free zone over to Las Vegas to see what they were up to, what they were doing, she thinks she can be friends with Jenny. But when they discover about Dana, she sees something just flip like a switch in Jenny, and all of a sudden she is much more vicious, savage. She wants to see blood. So then there's something absolute or fundamental about the nature of the human heart. It can be relatively good or bad, and it can be absolutely either good or bad. And then at the end of the book, there is punishment for the bad ones and salvation for the good ones, as you would expect. So on a higher level than humans, there is the level of deities, let's say. There is God, who does seem to make an appearance with his hand, the hand of God, it's the sovereign will of God that will decide things in the end. And then there is that demon that is shown so clearly. There are times in the book when it is suspected that he could have been a normal human being because he has these recollections of living a normal life, but he's kind of forgetful about them. So I was wondering whether he was maybe a person, went a little dark and more until he became the embodiment of evil. But then there's also the answer that this is a timeless evil that's possessed this vessel, let's say. So, it's always this duality on two levels. Like, one is a milder level and then the more severe level. And with regard to God, most of the characters seem to have a negative outlook. Even the greatest representative, Mother Abigail, this prophetess character, even she has her doubts. These characters say, why do we have to endure so much suffering, let's say, just in general words? Why is there so much punishment? Why can't everything be set right, like a Garden of Eden, let's say, and we just live in it? And then there's always that second voice that says, maybe we brought it on ourselves. Maybe we have something to correct here. Maybe we have to make some kind of sacrifice to make good for it. So there's this, maybe on the level of the author, there's this doubt around God and religion, but then the other side of belief. And on the third level, in no order in particular, I would say it's a view of a great author trying to write the great American novel, of the morality of his own country, and also extrapolated to governments and communities anywhere in the world. So this idea of rule, there's this concern with power. So let's talk about America. There's this question, why all the guns? And why are people trying to create hierarchies in which some will be at the top, and how will the others below feel oppressed? So this is the darker side, the bad side. But then there's also good, positive commentary. For me, the clearest example was when Stu and Tom Cullen, on their way back from Las Vegas to the free zone, so in between they're in the Rockies, in the winter, there's snow everywhere, there are no people, it's all desolate. Yet Stu remembers to make a Christmas tree on Christmas Day, and he has presents for Tom, and they sing the first Noel. And I was wondering when I was reading this, what is this song? Do I need to look it up? But then the lyrics came up, and of course I remember the song. It's a classical song for Christmas. And then they hugged afterwards. So it's commentary on the love in the American heart and culture, as well as, again, going outward more generally to all people, we could say. So again, there's this duality the entire time of the book. Now, let's talk a little bit about the style of writing. To me, looking at a great American novel like this, there's no question that there's something consumerist as well about the style of writing. I would compare Stephen King's style of writing to what I would call the American notion of flirting. And you might say, what is that? So to me, it's like the Deadpool movie. I think that's another great example, a parallel. There's an obscenity about it and sarcasm all the way throughout. So, if we're talking about the realm of flirting, a popular way of flirting that I think was created in America is to say the opposite of what you mean. So if there's a beautiful woman and she asks, "How do I look?" and a man might say, "Oh, you are so ugly." But he's supposed to mean the opposite of that. And if you watch Deadpool, it's like that all the time. So it gets pretty annoying after a while because they never seem to get to the point of it. Yet, on the other hand, it's also funny. I don't think you can watch Deadpool without cracking at least a smile from time to time. So it's sort of consumerist. One example that I would like to discuss is when people get shot, especially from like machine gun fire in Stephen King's novels. He always describes it as he started doing the jig-a-jig. Now, I'm not sure what the jig-a-jig is, but it's probably a shaking of the shoulders and chest of the torso. So they're just vibrating all over the stage and then they fall over. In real life, that sort of a thing would not be funny. If any of us saw it, it would be terrifying. But there is the element of entertainment, and it's supposed to show action. It's supposed to make us laugh in a way. In the psychological way of when we see something threatening, we might end up laughing about it to make it almost lighter. The goal of an author is always, when he or she gets an image in their mind, not to use stock phrases, which is always the temptation, it's just faster, but to depict it clearly the way they see it. And I think Stephen King does a great job at that. He'll use, let's say, stock phrases in his own words and meaning. So he creates new stock phrases, which is sort of like what Shakespeare did, isn't it? So great job, Stephen King. You are one of the greats. Now, regarding the author's style in its consumerist way, let's talk about characters and heroism. Sometimes it seems wasteful to me. He'll set up characters, they are supposed to become heroes, and he's moving them towards their great feat. But at some point, they'll fail. They'll blunder, maybe they'll have an accident, and then someone else completely unrelated that you never expected would do anything would take over the role. That being said, no one is truly a great hero in this book. So the closest would probably be Stu. I think the character Stu is the closest to being heroic. But when you look at it, he was going towards the stand in Las Vegas, but he never made it because his leg broke. And then his great act was to get back to the free zone to become this sort of supporting character for Fran. These are not the heroes that, in my own taste, I would have liked to see. I always want someone like Odysseus, Achilles, Superman, these grand heroes. But on the other hand, it's not so bad because in real life, there are very few great heroes. Most of the time, we try to do good things to the best of our ability, but it doesn't always work. So that's the way the characters appear in Stephen King's novel. So if you like realism, that's where Stephen King succeeds, which is counterintuitive within the horror genre. The greater point is, I see this sort of wheel of fortune. At times, let's say it crashed, there was the virus, everything was in chaos, and then it starts improving. It never goes too far high, because the weight is on the bottom, if that makes sense. It's sort of skewed to go back down and down again. In which way does a horror movie usually end? They'll get rid of the bad guy, but then he'll rise one last time. And this book is not an exception to that either. So again, there's this hope against experience. Sort of bad things have happened, but we still hope because that's the last human emotion and drive. There might be some scattering of the clouds and sunlight poking through, but then in the end, it'll go back down again. In the end, it falls to ruin again. So overall, it seems Stephen King was more towards that pessimistic side, and it's okay. It's okay. I would praise him for his honesty. If that's what he sees the world as, darker, and as a horror writer, that's from him, that's what you would expect. It's okay if he's honest about it. That's his view. So would I recommend this book to people? Of course, because it has lessons to learn and it has plenty of entertainment from start to finish. So I would definitely recommend it. Does it aspire toward great literature? That too. Yes, it is good literature. It probably will make it into some kind of a canon in the future. I'm sure it's won awards and it will probably continue winning awards. So this is definitely a great choice for anyone that sometimes likes to watch horror movies, let's say.